Hi again, everyone. I'm Ollie Matthews. This is the Narcissistic Resistance, and this resistance video is sponsored by contribution from Anonymous. And here's her story. Ollie, this is so scary to send to you, but I need to do it. I would appreciate any thoughts you have. I consider you a friend now, and I am so grateful to you. I hope this contribution is enough for now. I will send more when I can. I particularly need your insight about my daughter, who I think has largely adopted the traits of my ex, and now is punishing me the same way he used to. She now exhibits the same lack of empathy and cold-heartedness. It is disturbing and heartbreaking. In the last 4 years since she has been away from home, I have continually offered apologies for any ill treatment she suffered. Away from home? I don't know how old did she move away, or was she living with her father? I don't know maybe we'll find out. I don't try to excise myself or minimize the chaos I'm responsible for. I was the mother I admit I could not cope well. I was depressed, sad, and desperate most of the time. I was often short-tempered and not in control. I see clearly now I was squeezed in between my sick mother, who I believe actually worked to exploit me and to create division with my daughter and was cruel to her, my sick ex, and then a child who needed me too. I look back and realize how mistreated I was on all sides. I have worked hard to own my own shortcomings and become the person that I know I can be. It is amazing how well you can become when you close the gate to abuse and torment. I'd also like your thoughts on my ex. Sometimes I look back and wonder if it really was that weird, or if it was just me and my mind has just distorted it all. Never once in decades of therapy did anyone ever ask me if there were any malignant pathological narcissists in my life. Even now, it is hard to fathom that this is a reality for me, that I have been this kind of target. You want to keep denying it, but realize it only makes sense and explains years of suffering, despair, and utter hopelessness. I am 53, the mother of a 21-year-old daughter. I was married to her father very briefly, got married after having birth, and separated almost immediately. I wanted to get away from him after 2 months of dating, but didn't know how. I literally did not think it was okay to decide who I wanted to date. I suffered terribly, but could not leave him. Afraid of his anger, afraid of his disapproval, afraid of retaliation, afraid of everything. I was a psychological prisoner, as sure as if I had been in actual chains. I realize now I was set up for this from the beginning. I came from an affluent but deeply unhappy family with a pathological mother and enabling father. She is now 86. You can never pin her down, and every other thing out of her mouth is a lie. Every single interaction for her has to mean she is getting something out of you. The world is born to serve her. She is vicious and mean and hateful, but stays just this side of the law and maintains a mostly mild exterior and upper-class demeanor. She volunteers at a soup kitchen, but barely speaks to her own children, and has not even met some of her grandchildren. People think she is a saint. The only time she acts humble or authentic is when she feels she has lost control and needs to reestablish herself as a needy person, deserving of deference. So predictable, sometimes I still fall for it. My father died prematurely of heart disease in 1996. I think she drove him crazy to an early grave. I learned later from one of my brothers that she called the airline and tried to make them stop me from boarding and coming home for my father's funeral. Oof. I will elaborate on her and my father later in my next letter. Suffice to say that my siblings and I think of ourselves as abandoned children because she did no parenting at all and did not remotely resemble a mother. We have been lost all our lives. I will get into this later in the next letter, but for now, know that my mother is one of the most dishonest people alive. Anyway, I was in my late 20s. This guy would show up stinking, literally smelling, for dates. It did strike me as bizarre, but I was trained well and buried my revulsion. I always had the cold beer and chilled mugs, looked cute and fresh with cheese and nuts out for his pleasure. I was a gracious host. I was still in my 20s and very attractive. First time he came over, he looked around and said, "How do you afford this?" Ollie, it was an apartment. That's all it was. I had never even imagined such a question from someone I barely knew. He criticized everything. Once we were in a restaurant and the waitress asked smoking or non-smoking, and I said non. He yelled at me for answering and said he should have answered instead. The guy had about 100 parking tickets and was often towed. Refused to read or respect signs. Once we went to pick up his car that had been towed, and he berated the lady there so viciously it was disturbing. I was so embarrassed. The rules never applied to him. He was eventually arrested for unpaid tickets, as I recall, during a routine stop. He used sarcasm to belittle me, made fun of me for working late, and showed anger when I just wanted to do a good job as a single woman and pay my bills. This caused a huge fight. I loaned him my new car. He always drove pieces of junk that were always breaking down. He dropped cream cheese bits of a bagel in it and dismissed me when I became very angry. He called me nigger rich because I was financing the car. I have never used that word in my life and never would. When we met, he told me he had an important import-export business. Oh, God, beware of the import-exporters. Oh, they all have import-export businesses. I learned he had never actually ever had a job for longer than 6 months. He was 32 years old. He would laugh and tell me how after college he and his friends would go throughout Europe drinking at bars and then take off without paying. I guess he thought I would be amused. That's the narcissist for you. Always, if you can get away with something, they always will. He was expelled from college for plagiarism and for stealing a book, but was later readmitted to finish his degree. One time I said that my dad had been a Marine and that I was proud of him and that the U.S. was the greatest country in the world, and he said, "Bullshit." I was remembering a friend my father had lost in Korea, and I felt like he was spitting on this soldier's grave. He never asked about me, inquired about my interests, or seemed to care who I was. I asked all the questions. I thought that is how you show care and concern. You ask about the other person, and you're interested in that person's life. He never asked a thing, not one thing about my life, my interests, my dreams, nothing, because they don't care. They don't. Not only do they not ask, they don't even think to ask. The narcissist doesn't even cross their minds to find out about you, because you're just a pawn to them. You're just a toy. You're just a tool. You're just an inanimate object. It would be like going to ask, "Hey, Rock, what are your interests?" They could care less. They see you just the same as they see as a possession or an inanimate object. It was like he was with me physically, but purposefully making sure that he was never really present. He had an arrogant demeanor and an almost angry presence. He walks like he had the proverbial chip on his shoulder, almost looking for a problem. This just made me wonder why he disliked me so, what was wrong with me, and what I needed to do better. I was so unhappy, I eventually broke up with him over the phone, very nicely, very kindly. He hung up on me to show his anger and then called back to say, "Forget it. I couldn't go through with it." Then I called him back to say, "Forget it. I couldn't go through with it." I broke up with him again after we were engaged. Then we were walking home for work, and there he was following me. I was cornered. I remember once crying my eyes out, sitting on the floor, telling him how unhappy I was and that we needed to part, but that I cared for him, and could he please be a friend to me and understand. I begged for a shred of empathy. I remember his words, "I'm not interested in that." I got pregnant out of sheer desperation and not caring. I know that I had given up. I was trapped and homeless. There was no pleasure in the act. He did not hug me or kiss me or show me affection. It lasted about 4 seconds. 2 weeks later, after I told him I needed time to cope with this, the pregnancy, and process it, could I have just a little space, he was stalking me at an event, literally following me around, trying to intimidate me. After my daughter was born, he was with her a great deal. Long before any court documents, it was a matter of course that he would be involved in her life. I knew I had a moral obligation and that it wasn't my right to bestow that privilege, so I always made it easy for him. Once after my daughter's birth, I was out for a rare night and he was staying with the baby. I was excited because I hadn't been anywhere since my pregnancy and was dressed up. My late father, he died unexpectedly 2 weeks before my daughter was born, was being remembered at my brother's school dinner and fundraiser. It was a fun, formal event and kind of a prestigious school. I came out afterward all excited, feeling kind of social and human again, and he asked me how it was to be hanging out with all my hoity-toity friends. I actually had no friends there. I cried all the way home. That commenced 18 years of rearing my daughter, feeling defective, unloved, unlovable, and strung out. Trying my hardest to be a fair co-parent and do the right thing by both of them. I can't even enumerate the cruelties and years of misery. He always said, "I'm the best thing that ever happened to you." I know that in those years I did lose my mind to some degree, and that was indeed crazy. I lost all perspective and thought that it was just me, all of it, that I was just born crazy. Once I had an eye infection, a huge whelp and unsightly inflammation, and he was picking up our daughter at my apartment. I spoke to him through my bedroom, saying that I didn't want to be seen, wasn't presentable, and just go on with her or whatever. The next thing I knew, my door was shoved open and he just looked at me triumphantly. I was humiliated. Yeah, because they want to see you at your low point. They want to see it. They know something's wrong. They want to see it. They want to be there to hover over you. Every time I saved money or was almost going to break free emotionally or was happy about something or optimistic, he came at me with something. A baseless, expensive lawsuit. I always followed the rules, or an attack, or intimidation, or head games. But I tried and never gave up. When my daughter was 12, he kept me in court for almost 2 years. I still have panic attacks when I hear the doorbell ring. I was served so many times. I had to wipe out my bank account and I still owe lawyers. No court ever found I had done anything wrong. I always followed the court orders. He started suing me out of the blue after I tried to distance myself again finally. So I was so broke, the last go-round, my lawyer had to drop me when I couldn't pay her. My cousin, a prominent attorney in my town, had to step in for free when my ex tried to force me into court-ordered counseling with him when my daughter was 15. I don't know what the accusations are going back and forth. So, I mean, you're telling me he's dragging me into court, but not why. I think he had this idea that counseling would make me compliant and want to be with him. Anyway, okay, so you're thinking he's dragging you in the court after 15 years, still trying to make the relationship work? Anyway, my cousin blew it to hell and said there was no basis for him to try to force me to do anything, and the judge agrees after almost laughing at him. My ex used to virtuously say that it was all for our daughter. I always thought it was all just to control me and stop me from daring not wanting him in my life. Ollie, he is very strange about things sexually on related matters. He always seemed very uncomfortable with his sexuality as a man, even though I had been what you would call a good girl and never got around in that way when I met him. I had dated a lot and always knew men who were comfortable with themselves and with me. My previous boyfriends and I had a lot of fun doing the mating dance, so to speak. We had fun socially, expressed ourselves naturally, even joked about things. With my ex, he always seemed frozen. He seemed embarrassed about it all. The few times we had sex, he barely moved. He didn't seem excited or enthused at all. And God knows he never expressed anything complimentary to me. It was over in under 5 seconds, and he never made a sound, never touched me, showed any affection. I could have been a wooden board. Another weird thing that I remember. One year I was cleaning a turkey to cook. I had just about finished and noticed something else inside the turkey that looked like a penis or something. I was just going to take it out, not even sure what it was. I actually thought it was hilarious, the kind of thing you would normally laugh about. Anyway, I remember he kind of freaked out. He was so disgusted that he almost fainted. I always thought it was so strange that he took it so seriously, like he wasn't comfortable with something that resembled a male body part. He has been audited almost every year and has a history of not reporting income. Not even 3 years ago, he moved back from being away, and he happened to mention that his company would reimburse him up to $10,000 for moving expenses. Then, without thinking, I guess, he said, now I just have to come up with the expenses. He was basically going to fabricate costs. I also think he uses a company credit card for very questionable expenses. I know that he loves to show off by paying for things with our daughter that he's not really paying for. Me, I always paid cash, my money, and was always broke bringing her up. The last time I saw him, we were fighting over his refusal to get my daughter eyeglasses when she was leaving for college. I didn't have enough money for them, and he promised to get them and then reneged, as he did so many times on so many things. We had a huge fight. He ended up pinning me to the ground and said, "Don't you know I could kill you?" It sounds like he just hates women. Sounds like he's like a closet borderline who hates women. That was 3 years ago. He never had enough money for things she needed, or things to make her life just a little nicer, but always had money for top-notch Whole Foods meals, fly his piss-poor parents in, his trips to the East Coast, etc. About his family. His mother is an Austrian immigrant who seems to dominate her husband and sons. When I would visit, she would literally tell her husband when to go to bed, calling out, "Raymond, come to bed, Raymond." Although she dominates and babied her sons, for example, doing her grown son's laundry, who lives nearby, when she was at least 70, she never learned to drive in America and never went anywhere alone. I remember she forwarded mail to my ex routinely, and I always wondered why he had been gone from home for 15 years and had never forwarded his own mail to where he was. Once she sent home a bunch of old, unusable junk clothing with my daughter after a visit. Most of their stuff came from Goodwill or other people, so you can imagine what it was. Anyway, I was irritated because I had just organized our home and her things, and then you just have to get rid of it yourself. Explain to a small child why you aren't keeping it, and why, and I would think you would ask your mom or parent before you do that. Anyway, I decided to be a little assertive and called her and asked her not to do that in the future. I was not rude, just firm. Next thing you know, ex calls blasting me for making his mother cry. Good grief. Flash to today, my daughter is a complete witch to me, except when I'm buying her something or doing exactly what she wants. Any attempt to require her to speak to me respectfully, not be rude and dismissive, or show me some basic respect is met with tantrums and fits. I can't tell you the money I have spent, the friends I have hosted, the breakfasts I have cooked for her and her friends. I have done all I can to help get her through college. I have done books, groceries, personal items, gas, whatever I could for several years. Yes, a lot of this is guilt over my past mistakes and instability, but I also want to help her. I don't know what these mistakes and instability is. Okay? You're telling me there's a lot of mistakes and instability. You're giving me a laundry list of vague things your ex has done, nothing really specific. I mean, you're writing a lot of words, but you're not really saying a lot here. You're not really telling me much. which is kind of concerning to me, because there's a reason why your daughter's taking up the characteristics of your ex-husband. There's a reason. Every time I draw a line kindly, she barges right over it, and I have ended up crying for weeks, and she decides not to speak to me. See, the crying for weeks thing, and if you're literally sitting there going on emotionally, crying for weeks, okay, that is emotional blackmail you're perpetrating on your children and on the people around you. That is emotional blackmail. It is detrimental, and it's probably a big reason why she's treating you the way she's treating you, because they're sick of it. People get sick of that shit. They get sick of it. She barges right over, and I've ended up crying for weeks as she decides not to speak to me, to tell me what a horrible mother I am and was. The other day she told me that I was the devil because I said I wouldn't commit to paying her internet at her apartment anymore unless she was courteous and respectful to me. You shouldn't be paying it at 21 anyway. No, she would not even discuss it with me. I paid for it last semester and then got tired of her hanging up on me, never responding to me, leaving on every holiday with her father without even telling me, giving me the time of day, etc. May I also say that she quits almost every part-time job because she doesn't like something, and that's why she's broke. You can see from the picture that I attached that she is a pretty girl and very together when she wants to be. I didn't flinch during this last fight, just let her leave and did not respond in kind. You and your videos have helped me so much. Not sure if she's a narcissist or just doing learned behaviors, but it feels exactly the same to me. Like how I've been treated my whole life. I give, they take, it hurts so much. She is not responding to me, and it makes me feel awful. Like I said, I am far from perfect, have tried to make amends, don't really know what else to do. Thanks, Ollie. Anonymous. Cut her off. If you continue to chase the narcissist will abuse you, especially a narcissistic child. Especially a narcissistic, spoiled brat of a child. Now, whatever your issues are, whatever you're not telling me in this letter, okay, you really need to be honest and deal with honestly between you, your daughter, and whoever else. Okay, this crying for weeks thing needs to stop. Needs to stop. Because at one point it might have annoyed her. Now at this point she uses it to torture you and knows she's got you. You need to cut her off completely. Completely. No internet, no money, no phone calls, no nothing. Okay? Give it 2 weeks and she'll be beating your door down after in a month max. Max, she'll be beating your door down. And believe me, she's not going to come back with her tail between her legs right away. She's going to say even more horrific shit that you just don't respond to. Don't respond to. And what you're going to end up getting is her blubbering at your door. Blubbering at your door, I'm sorry, mommy. That's what you will get from her eventually. Only if, and only if you stick to your guns. Look, I'm going to tell you right out, I can tell you there's a lot of shit you ain't telling me in here. A lot. And there's probably a lot of stuff you're responsible for that you admit to that you haven't told me. Okay? You said a lot here, but you didn't really say much. You used a lot of words, but didn't really say a whole hell of a lot. But I will tell you this. If a 21-year-old is making those type of demands, that you have to pay this and you have to do that, that is a spoiled, rotten little social justice snowflake, okay, that you need to cut the fuck off. You want to melt the snowflake, you gotta cut it off. Okay, you gotta turn off the cooler. You want to melt the snowflake. Because the snowflake will melt if you turn off the cooler. If you continue to chase the narcissist will abuse you, will continue to abuse you. It's that simple. So that's the best advice I can give you, Anonymous. So thank you so much for your contribution and your story. I really hope that helped. Thank you to everybody watching. Please leave any opinions or advice in the comment section below. And again, if you want your story read on the channel, you have a topic you'd like me to cover, a narcissist you'd like to expose, you'd like to set up Skype, a phone call, have a private video made, or a Facebook live chat, or you'd like to sponsor a video like this for someone who needs help and can't afford it, or just make a contribution to the resistance in general to keep it growing, supported, and expanding, because this channel survives 100% on contributions from all of you, because Google is still screwing us. So if you like what you see here and you want to see more videos like this, you know what to do with the PayPal and email links in the description box. Also, please like and share this video wherever you can. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't, and be sure to click the subscription bell to be notified of all my video uploads. I'm Ollie Matthews. This has been the Narcissistic Resistance. Take care.